up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Oh, well, I don't wanna jinx it, baby, and twist myself at the spine. Don't wanna overthink it, baby. It's just twist your body and mine. Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're giving me wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Oh, but I don't wanna jinx it, baby. Let's not get ahead of my time. Oh, but I don't wanna miss you, baby. So I stand up and speak my mind. Oh. Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're chilling wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're channeling wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Oh, 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 oh,
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the City of Santa Barbara Harbor Commission regular meeting for May 16th, 2024. Angela, can you please do a roll call?
Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
Commissioner Cohen?
Here.
Commissioner Ford?
Here.
Commissioner McRae?
Here.
Commissioner Nelson?
Here.
Commissioner Stanowick?
Here.
Chair Stedman?
Here.
Thank you.
And is there any general public comment?
We have one speaker for general public comment, Mr. Chris Voss.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Chris Voss, and I'm President of the Commercial Fishermen of Santa Barbara. And I just want to encourage everyone to come to the swap meet at the harbor parking lot this Saturday. Ed Anderson at Anderson Custom Boats has donated a bunch of really valuable things to CFSB, and so CFSB will have a booth there and be selling those and then other things that fishermen have that are heavy and shiny and valuable. So come on down. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any online hands raised?
At this moment, there are no hands raised online.
Any changes to the agenda, Director?
Yeah, Chair Stedman, we're going to be pulling item 3 off the agenda. So this is the Conway Vineyards lease amendment. They'll no longer be amending that lease, so we're just going to pull that item completely.
Perfect. Vice Chair?
Yes, thanks, Chair Sedman. Yeah, for work group reports, I believe the business strategy work group met, and Commissioner Ford would like to comment on that.
Yes, absolutely. Strategic Planning Work Group, it met on May 10th, and we continue discussing ways that we can move forward on strategic planning. I must say, though, we haven't yet received the Waterfront team's final iteration of the goal-setting document that was shared with us in March, and that's going to be great to see because it will include all the activities and initiatives going forward. And I would just say that with the tentative vision of our harbor being, quote, an exemplar of a California port providing excellent value to our diverse stakeholders, we also intend to reinforce one of the principal goals of the local coastal plan and the harbor master plan to ensure that the harbor remains a working harbor. And as a reminder to the Commission, we just hope to correlate all these documents with the following areas. 1, commerce, growth, and enjoyment of the waterfront. 2, fiscal and legal management. 3, safe and sustainable environment. And number 4, communication. Also, our work group would like to reiterate that we made a request that strategic planning be included as part of every meeting agenda going forward, whether it's for an update, a report, or an action item. And our next strategic planning work group meeting is June 12th. Work group partners, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Yes. One thing that would be helpful at the end of the last month's meeting, I asked if we could look into the different jurisdictions. What is the harbor district? Does the harbor district just cover the submerged lands, or does it just, what does it include? How much water, how much land, as well as just to have an idea of what the purview of the Harbor Commission is. We had a presentation, I guess a couple of years ago, by the State Lands Commission, and they had a map that showed the tidelands, the footprint of the tidelands. So it'd be nice to see the footprint of the tidelands as well as the where the harbor district stands both on land and at sea. And then there's sort of a jurisdictional issue between parks and the beaches and us and the buildings and parking lots. So the strategic planning group's trying to get our hands around our purview. And one of the ways to do that is take a look at all the different jurisdictional maps. So if you could do that for us when you're pulling the stuff that she asked for in terms of your annual goal setting, that'd be great.
Yeah, and just to speak to that, I spent some time between last meeting and now, and it's really varied. And so there, even the map that the State Lands Commission provided didn't even encompass the entire harbor business district, which it should and obviously does. And so there's a whole bunch of varied interpretation out there from what the tidelands are to what the city has agreed upon organizationally on how we're going to manage things. And so
That's my issue. I mean, tonight we're going to talk about the mooring areas that are on,
those are on our within the harbor for sure.
they're in the
Yeah,
harbor district.
they're within the harbor waterfront's purview.
Okay. Waterfront's purview is different than, I mean, I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is that what is the what's legally, because when you look at the charter, it also says we have the same authority for the waterfront as we do the harbor, and I'm like, well, but does that reflect just the parking lots and the buildings, or does
No,
that,
definitely the waterways and moored areas. I mean, our municipal code governs our mooring area and anchorages, and so that is developed and reviewed by Harbor Commission, so that would be well within that zone.
Okay.
Great, thanks for the updates. Would anybody like to speak on behalf of another work group? I don't think any other work group met.
The cruise ship work group did meet this week. Is that good? Everyone hear me? And it was digesting what council had come back with recommendations of. And staff has really done a very good job breaking down each not only sentence, but there's a really long sentence they came back with, so each section, to 21 actionable points. And staff's done a lot more work behind the scenes than I was aware of, and especially in terms of the economic side of things. And so we are still digesting, but I would say before we have a more full report, I think we'll have something again before the year is over for the full commission.
Great, thanks, Commissioner Anderson. Okay, I think we can move on to the consent calendar, approval of the minutes. We have the regular meeting minutes as well as the special meeting, which consisted of the budget. Ms. Rodriguez, would you please read item number 1?
Item number 1, approval of the minutes. Recommendation that Harbor Commission waive further reading and approve the minutes from the regular meeting of April 18th, 2024, and the special meeting of April 24th, 2024.
Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Cohen?
Yes.
Commissioner Ford?
Yes.
Commissioner McCray?
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stanowick?
Yes.
Chair Stedman?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Vice Chair Stanwick. Moving on to new business, item number 2. Angela, can you please read that?
Item number 2, Santa Barbara County Air Pollution Control District presentation on the 2024 Clean Air Grants for Marine Vessels. Recommendation that Harbor Commission receive a presentation from the Santa Barbara County Air Pollution Control District on their 2024 Clean Air Grants for Marine Vessels, eligibility, priority populations of low-income and disadvantaged communities, grant agreement process, and outreach.
Good evening, Chair, members of the board. Am I good now? All right. This presentation is very similar to what you've seen in years past. There's a little more expertise on our side now with the commercial harborcraft regulation and what stresses the vessels are feeling from that and how we can help. So hopefully this presentation gets everyone on the same page to know where we can help with that. So you can go to the next slide. So our 24 program opens in late July, begins a 40-day application window. It's not a first come, first serve, so there's 40 days for everybody to get all their stuff in, and then we look and rank all projects or all applications after that 40-day window closes. We rank them on a variety of items like location, type of project, total emission reductions, cost effectiveness, et cetera. And we do prioritize funding for zero emission projects along with those located within low income and disadvantaged communities. You can go to the next slide. So the pink highlights you see here are disadvantaged communities, while the light blue highlights are low income communities, both of which are defined by the state. We focus spending a large portion of our grant funds within these specific areas. And as you can see, the Santa Barbara Harbor is defined by the state as a low-income community. So we do prioritize funding for marine vessels in the Santa Barbara Harbor. So you go to the next slide. So we require vessels to operate 50% of the time in the coastal waters of Santa Barbara, SLO, and Ventura counties, with the remaining of that in California coastal waters. That was changed maybe 2 years ago. We used to require 100% in the 3-county waters, so we spread that, reduced that percentage, and allowed vessels to operate outside of that range. So over the last 5 years, we've received 32 applications for marine projects. 23 of those 32 applications received offers for grant funding, and only 11 accepted. So it's the 12 that declined. We're trying to figure out why. There's a number of reasons, which I was talking to Commissioner McCray about earlier. It's typically the dollar amount that we can give maybe isn't high enough to justify the total cost of the project, and maybe they can't afford it. Maybe they're off season. Or the season wasn't as profitable as they wanted it to be. There's a number of reasons. And it is an emission reduction program. So when a project doesn't have high usage from an older engine, the offer is typically reflective of that and sometimes cannot be that enticing to the owners. You can go to the next slide. So this is the process we use for application funding. So once we receive an application, we work with the applicant to make sure that we have everything for completeness. We then review all the projects after the application window closes, and then we rank them based on some of the items I mentioned on slide 2. So the process looks tedious, Then there's a lot of back and forth that I personally have. I'm the one that manages the marine side of our grant program, so a lot of back and forth with the boats. And it does pay off in the end if it's selected for funding. I actually met one of your fishermen right out here just before the meeting to get some paperwork from him. So there's a lot of collaboration back and forth. So you can go to the next slide. So we've given over $4 million to marine projects over the years, and in late June, we'll be sending emails to our outreach list, which has over 1,100 contacts, announcing the program with details on how to apply, requirements to qualify, et cetera. So in addition to the items seen here, we are definitely open to ideas from the commission on how to better get the word out. We try to do everything we can. I'm constantly in the harbor. Each boat, I'm down there 3 different times. So I've been down there plenty. And anybody has any recommendations on how to better advertise, we're open. Please let us know. So the next slide. And the reason for that is we have the commercial hovercraft regulation. So this is the daunting regulation that all of the boats commercially operating in the harbor are going to have to deal with one way or another eventually. So this table was created at the request of your commission 2 years ago. That was back when the regulation was still in draft form, and we were all trying to figure out what dates applied to who and who applied to what. So I have copies that I've left here, hard copies that are obviously on the presentation itself. So the compliance timeframe dates on the right column are extremely important, and they differ based on vessel usage and the year of the engine. So this is a state regulation. So our grant program is more of a bridge between the regulation timeframes and assisting the marine vessels in becoming compliant. And what's important to know is we are also bound by a minimum 1-year project life. And so what that means, a commercial passenger fishing vessel with a 2010 or older engine is required to be replaced with a Tier 3 or newer engine by the end of 2026. So if we don't have an executed grant agreement by the end of 2025, then there's nothing we can do for that specific engine and vessel as far as our program is concerned. So that's why we're trying to be extremely proactive with the marine community and make sure there's people I've talked to that aren't even aware of these dates. We're trying to get the word out. We're trying to make sure that they know that they're going to be required and the longer they wait, the less money they can get because the grant amount is directly reflected on the project life and the project life is reflected on the compliance date. So the downside obviously is a shorter project life and the money is less. And that's a bummer because there's a couple boats we were working with this year where they were commercial passenger fishing and they had extremely short project lives and we just couldn't give them enough money for them to justify the project. So they're trying to deal with their business model and what to do. So once that compliance deadline is less than a year out, there's nothing that we can do for the grant program to help the marine community. I've talked to the state about lessening that, trying to make it a 6-month window for those. But I mean, a 6-month window, I mean, the return on that's going to be really small, but it's better than 0. So we haven't got approval on that change yet, but that's something I requested because I was talking to one of the marine guys about that actually, and he brought it up, and I thought that was a good idea to pass on. So you can go to the next slide. This is this contact information and any inquiries that anybody has. I'm the one that will be getting back to them. There's my direct number, my email, and then the general grants email. So, like I said, anything that you guys have recommendations for us to get the word out and get more marine applications. You know, like I said, over the past 5 years, we've only had 32 applications. And only a few of them didn't qualify because they just didn't have the records in order, but anything we can do to help. So I don't know if you have any questions or.
Commissioner McCray.
First, I'd like to thank you for building that extensive list of the CARB compliance dates and so forth. That's, I think, really helpful. And the other piece I think is really helpful is your comment that you just made, that the sooner you apply, the more you're likely to be eligible for. So sooner is better than later, even, sounds like even week by week, because each week is a fuel-burning week.
Truly, yep.
Thank you very much for that. And I also wanted to note that the Santa Barbara County APCD is not the California Air Resources Board. So if you're a fisherman out there feeling the pressure, The APC did not make those rules, CARB did.
It's truly a case of, we are the government, but we actually are here to help, so please.
Commissioner Cohen?
Thank you for that presentation. I'm just curious, where does your funding come from? And maybe I missed that.
It comes from the state. It's a state
Okay.
funding. The Carl Moyer program has been around for 26 years. That's where part of our funding comes from. And then we have a community air protection program. And what that does, we're only allowed to spend that money in low income and disadvantaged communities. So that money actually has to go into those blue and pink areas that I showed on that slide. So we get funding from both of those sources. We have another funding source, but it's only for agriculture, so it's unrelated to marine. But it comes from like greenhouse gas reduction funds and air pollution control funds. So there's things at the state level. Even with the state's budget this year, we already have money coming in for next year's program. So
That's my next
yeah,
question.
that-
Are you
yeah.
going to be impacted by this budget?
We
or-
might the following year, but this coming year, we're not.
So you're going to be, your funding is 4 million for the full year, is that right? Or,
How much?
I'm sorry, what was on the first
Oh, no,
slide?
that's how much money we've given over the years.
Over the time. I was-
Correct. Yeah,
okay,
no,
okay.
no, it's not $4 million. It's, we're probably in the 1.5 to 2 million range
Okay,
for projects that Marine would qualify for.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then as far as reaching out to the marine community, I mean, we do have the swap meet this weekend and, we do have events and I don't know if you ever do any tabling. I'm sure there's people there that might come over and just, if you had a presence at any of our different events.
Yeah, to my
within
knowledge,
our-
we haven't been present at those events. We post flyers and things but that's actually where most of the boaters see our advertising is the paper flyer on the board at the.
And you're asking for ideas, so.
Yeah, no,
that would
thank you.
be-
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'll make note of that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ford?
Thanks. Excellent presentation. I'm new on the board or the commission, so it's really helpful for me to learn about this. I have no doubt that your outreach is probably very complete and comprehensive. I wonder if the application process is difficult and perhaps overwhelming for certain folks?
It absolutely is, especially most of them, at least the commercial side, being sole proprietors. And the only time they have to fill out the application is when they're supposed to be sleeping or getting their boat ready to go back out. And so there's a few of them that I've had to work with, and we're fine with handwritten stuff. We're fine with applications if it's on a notebook paper with a picture and it's texted to me. So we make it work because we understand the restrictions that some of the fishermen have with that. So,
Thanks.
yeah.
Commissioner Nelson?
Mike, this is off topic, but I think it was in the LA Times today. And I'm currently a member of the advisory committee for the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary, and Merritt was as well. And so can you give us a little bit on the Blue Whales Blue Sky program?
That I cannot speak to. And if my counterpart, I'll say his name public here, Tim Mitro was here, he's the bee's knees on that stuff. So me speaking to that would be.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I was just kind of curious. It's a great program that the council worked very hard on before I was there.
Yeah.
And it's like now I believe that the Air Pollution Control District is applying for funds to.
Yeah, they
add
are.
to
They're,
that.
he's in the same office as I am, and
Okay,
I
that's
hear
fine.
the
I
back
didn't
and
mean to
forth,
put you
but
on
I'm not
the spot.
involved.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, no, it's no problem. I'll let him know that you asked, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
Yeah. Commissioner Cohen, how would should I talk to the gentleman here about future swap meet and interaction type stuff?
I think that probably you would work
Yep.
with
Well, you can just
Director
email me.
Wilshire.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll email you then.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, great.
Any other questions? Thanks, Mike.
All right, thank you, appreciate it.
Item number 3, please, Angela. Oh, so that's canceled. Item number 4.
Item number 4, fiscal year 2025 waterfront budget recommendation excluding slip-related fees. Recommendation that Harbor Commission receive a presentation on the Waterfront Department's proposed fiscal year 2025 budget submittal excluding discussion on slip-related fees. Discuss and forward recommendations to City Council for approval of the Waterfront Department's proposed fiscal year 2025 budget and incorporation into the city's budget process.
Good evening, Chair Stedman, Commissioners, members of the public. My name is Cesar Barrios. I am the Waterfront Department's Business Manager. And tonight I will present to you our fiscal year 25 budget that, with your recommendation, will be introduced to City Council next week on Tuesday, May 21st. Okay, so we'll be covering a number of things, and here's you have the agenda in front of you here. We'll talk about some of the key budget messages. We'll talk about waterfront revenues, expenditures, reserves, as well as proposed fee adjustments, and also we'll look at our proposed capital projects that are scheduled for fiscal year 25, which will begin this July 1st. Okay, so the city operates on a July 1st to June 30th fiscal year. Currently, we are in the middle of a 2-year budget cycle, so the goal here is to make adjustments to the fiscal year that will start July 1st, as I previously mentioned. So for background, a huge amount of work and effort goes into this process, and here you have a timeline of major landmarks throughout the year. So staff starts preparing the budget in the fall of 2023. Then we presented that budget internally to the city administrator and the finance department. That was done in March. Then we held 2 meetings with the Harbor Commission Budget Work Group in March and April. And from there, we took those proposed fee adjustments to the Finance Committee this past May 7th. And that brings us to tonight's meeting. And after tonight, the Finance Department will present the entire city budget, which includes the waterfront budgets, to the full City Council on May 21st. And then the budget will be adopted effective on June 7th. And with that, I'll pass it over to Director Wiltshire, who will speak about key messages.
Thanks, Cesar. I just wanted to take a minute and look at some of the high-level things that we're dealing with when putting this budget together. So this is really a look at some of the headwinds that we have in front of us, some of the things that are unique this year that didn't really exist in the economy 2 years ago. So a lot has changed. One of the big ones on that top line, so this first little block of things, are really things that we're up against financially in the coming years. The biggest of all of those is insurance increases. So we're not alone here. The state of California is going through some major turmoil in the insurance industry. So where if you look back at our budgets for almost a decade prior to now, we sat around $300,000, $400,000 a year to cover property insurance and liability insurance. That has since gone up to about $1.4 million. So that's $1 million increase to essentially get nothing new, pay no more salaries. It's really just to stay status quo. And so being an enterprise fund, we need to come up with those dollars to be fiscally responsible and balance our budget. The other one in the same vein, insurance deductibles. So we currently have a deductible of $250,000 on Stearns Wharf. So if there's some sort of peril or issue with Stearns Wharf, we're on the hook for the first $250,000. It hasn't happened yet, but there's discussion, and it's looking like our insurance carriers are hesitant to insure a wooden wharf with everything that's been going on in California. There's talk of that deductible raising to upwards of $3 million. That puts us in a very different position, and so that means that we would be on the hook for the first $3 million of damage on Stearns Wharf, potentially. And so planning for those sort of things, that would essentially be something that we may have to reserve for, have that cash on hand if we needed to be able to repair Stearns Wharf in the event of an emergency. Storm-related expenses, it's starting to seem like it was longer ago, but the last 2 years we saw pretty historic storms. We put a little over $2 million into cleaning up after that, protecting our coastline, and so those were some unforeseen expenses that we were very lucky and to have reserves on hand to act quickly and respond quickly. Tenant revenue declines. So coming out of COVID, we were about as lucky as we possibly could have been. There was a lot of traveling, a lot of spending, a lot of restaurant going, a lot of people at the beach, a lot of boating activity. During COVID, if we had predicted the best case scenario, that was about it. You know, we had some pretty banner years. A lot of our tenants were doing record-breaking revenues. It was really a good time. But looking forward, we have to be a little more cautious and a little more optimistic on the economic outlook. I don't think we can hit those kind of numbers again for what our tenants are bringing in. And so just kind of an honest reality look at where we expect our tenant revenues to come in. And so those, we're predicting that those will decline in the next year or two. And then some of our large future projects that are on the out list, these are kind of bigger than our usual capital projects. So storm and sea level rise planning, there's going to be some large millions of dollars effort there to protect our coastline. Talking about the long range planning to replace Marinas 2, 3, and 4 like we did Marina 1. These are projects that cost more money than we have on hand. So trying to make sure that we have the dollars or hold reserves or start building up our reserves to help with some of these larger capital projects. On the revenue side, so some of our strategies, as I said before, we don't have a huge amount of levers. The waterfront really has 3 major revenue sources. So our slips, our parking lots, and our tenants. The 2 that we have the most control over, the tenants are in long-term lease agreements, and so we're really dependent on how they do business-wise. But slip fees and parking, those are really where we can kind of generate meaningful revenues to balance any expenditure increases. And so this budget cycle, we are planning a slip fee increase of 10%. That brings in about $500,000 in revenue. Slip fees are really reliable. We're full, and so people typically pay their slips, and it's a really reliable and predictable revenue source. We are also proposing a parking fee increase of 50 cents per hour in our waterfront lots, and that would bring in about $550,000. So you look at those 2 moves in totality, make about $1 million. That really just sort of makes up our insurance deficit. Then some other minor fees, and this budget cycle we are planning to use about $1 million in reserves to fund capital and balance the budget. Next slide. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but just to really highlight that we're not alone. So our 2 major insurance buckets are broken into 2 categories, property and liability. Property insurance for us is the huge one. It is by scale far bigger than what we pay in liability insurance, just covering all of the infrastructure, buildings, wharf, all the stuff that we have down at the harbor. And there's a list up there of kind of all of the reasons why throughout California the insurance market is getting tougher and more expensive to insure. Next slide. And this really just shows graphically over the last 5 or so years. So you look on the left, our liability insurance has increased from about $50,000 to upwards of $250,000. So there's about a $200,000 increase in liability insurance. And over on the right is the big one, property insurance, which was pretty flatlined around $400,000, and in the last 5 years has gone up exponentially. Next slide. I think that's where I pass it over to Caesar.
Excellent. Okay, so here to provide a high-level overview of revenues, expenditures. Here you have 2 pie charts illustrating the fiscal year 2025 budgeted revenues and expenditures. As revenues go, you can see the 3 major revenue sources for our department, with marina management accounting for 43% of all revenues, followed by property management and parking. Then expenses, salaries and benefits taking a big part of the pie chart, with roughly 40% of our expenditures, followed by supplies and services, as well as allocated costs, which are a significant portion of this pie chart. Okay, so on to fiscal year 25 revenues by program. So our property management revenues were very strong in fiscal year 23 as a result of the pent-up post-COVID demand. We have seen a decline in revenues in fiscal year 24 due to weather reduced demand in the economy, as well as reduced revenues from some key larger food service providers, tenants. For fiscal year '25, we're taking a cautious approach, estimating a slight reduction in property management revenues when compared to the fiscal year '25 base budget. There are some potential headwinds in fiscal year '25 as multiple large food service tenants are currently completing tenant improvements, construction, and depending on the timing, this could result in reduced revenues due to these conditions for the remainder of the year. At the same time, some of these projects may be completed prior to the end of the fiscal year, so we may not see such an impact at the start of fiscal year '25. Revenues in our financial management program are relatively small, but have increased significantly in fiscal year '24 and are anticipated to increase in fiscal year '25. These increases are mainly a result of promising interest rates, as well as the higher reserved balances that we currently hold. Moving on to parking services. So we continue to, it continues to be a reliable source of revenue stream. They are a function of the weather, so they've been slightly affected over the last few months with the weather. But the department projects a 3.9 increase over the fiscal year '25 approved budget. And ahead in this presentation, I will discuss some of the proposed increases for the parking rates that were suggested by the Harbor Commission, actually the Harbor Commission budget work group early in April. On to expenditures. So this table shows the Waterfront Department's expenditures approved as part of the current 2-year budget cycle and the recommended adjustments for fiscal year '25. You can see those in the last 2 columns as to compare. I'm sorry, the last 3 columns. Estimated roughly a 6% increase from fiscal year '25 base budget for overall expenditures. This increase is mainly due to an increase in allocated costs, property insurance, as Director Wilshire described, and employee benefits. Also, please note that this increase does include the capital projects scheduled for this upcoming year. So to describe some of these expenditures, the allocated costs includes fees paid to other city departments for services received such as IT, which covers all our computers and anything related to IT for our department. Fleet, that's maintenance of our vehicles. Finance, which is support through various processes that we do on a daily basis. City attorneys, and insurance, which is a big one. On supplies and services, this includes supplies, materials, and contracts to maintain and operate the waterfront, the nuts and bolts. With special projects, that includes the costs for the fireworks for July 4th and the parade of lights, as well as the cost to employ beach lifeguards. For non-capital equipment, that's technically all type of equipment purchased outside of any capital project. It could be smaller equipment in office and for facilities. On debt service, that includes loan repayments for loans used for past projects, including the Marina 1 replacement and the Stearns Wharf fire repairs from back in 1998 when we have that major fire. Also, at the top of the table, you see a 5% negative difference in salaries when compared to the approved budget versus the recommended, and this was brought up at the last meeting. So this is due mainly to corrections in projections the finance department had originally determined. At that time, the city was calculating positions at the top of the pay scale, So this was adjusted to better illustrate the actual expenses, as opposed to budgeting for everybody at the top step. They average how these positions were currently being allocated and worked in the revenue. And let's see here. And then in benefits, there is a rise, and so there's a difference. As you can see here, there's a difference between the salaries going down, benefits going up. So the rise here in benefits is mainly due to conservative planning by the finance department, anticipating larger increases due to group insurance, as well as the fading competition between the insurance providers. Also, the city is planning for an implementation of a class income study results, so that could switch how the benefits are allocated and likely will increase if any changes are made. Let's see. Okay, so now we're going to jump into reserves. So now we'll take this is basically a snapshot in time. The amounts of the reserves are a dynamic number that finance provides to us and changes every so often as depending on how our revenues are being processed. But so far the reserve picture it's a bright spot. It's spot in. Otherwise, compared to the current climate, we're doing fairly well. That's thanks to 2 very strong years with revenues over expenditures, especially coming out of the pandemic. We are in a good position. However, we're in a good position, but we're not in the greatest position per se. The text in blue at the top of the list, it's our required policy level reserves. So this is the amount that we're required to have on hand, required by the council. And that's disaster reserves, which is 15% of our operating budget, contingency reserves, capital reserves, which is equal to the average of the previous 3 years of capital expenditures. And that's something we recently changed as we eliminated the harbor preservation funds. So all the funds that were originally going to the harbor preservation fund, that you may recall was the figures going from 2 to 5 million. That was eliminated, and now all the funds were transferred to capital reserves. So with that, right now we are at a total of 5.5 million in reserves on hand. This is not a lot of money for a department that is operational intensive, as the waterfront is, and we're exposed to forces of nature that oftentimes we can't control. And a great example is what happened over the last few months when we had significant storms, and it was primarily very, very, very constant. So currently we have roughly 10 million in reserves, which is 5 million over policy. And with the current proposed fiscal year budget, we're projecting to use about 1 million of those reserves to fund capital projects and essentially balance the budget. So there's also a need to keep significant reserves on hand for larger pending projects years ahead, which that includes sea level rise response, coastal resilience, and which currently the focus is the Harbor West parking lot as well as the Ledbetter beachfront that suffer significant issues with the storms and the swells. Also, we have the Marina 2, 3, and 4 replacement projects. Those will cost upwards to $10 to $20 million. So building the reserves to cover this cost is very important. And unknown climate changes and coastal erosion and impacts to the breakwater, to the harbor, and to the wharf, especially as we discussed the potential change in the insurance premiums would likely be paying $3 million as their deductible. Okay, so now we move on to fee adjustments for fiscal year '25. And these are changes that were adjusted based post the 2-year cycle that was approved. So here you have permits and miscellaneous fees, adjustments from as I discussed, from fiscal year '25. Individually, the majority of these adjustments do not result in any significant revenue, but they basically true up minor fees with respect to inflation and cost recovery. Notably, the fee increase in this category that's most notable is the ice fee being dispensed. This is what's being dispensed at from the city pier, from the ice house, and it's increasing we're proposing to increase it from 10 cents to 15 cents per pound, and that will likely generate $35,000 in additional revenue. And as mentioned, we have various inflationary increases for the BAP, as well as some of our beach permits. Okay, so moving on to parking fees. So again, please note that this value, the just over $500,000, is not included in the current numbers that you're seeing, as this was recently proposed by the budget work group, and then recommended by the Full Harbor Commission at our last special meeting. So the most significant proposed fee here pertains to adjusting parking fee by 50 cents. So going from $3 to $3.50 per hour in the Harbor Main lot and outer lots. That will generate just about $500,000 in revenue. And then because of that increase, as a function of that increase, we're increasing Stearns Wharf as well by 50 cents, and that would increase from $3.50 per hour to $4 per hour. And that would generate just under $50,000, about $45,000 in revenue. Also, we are proposing a increase to the annual parking permit from $135 to $140. That's, again, for a whole year of parking. And for perspective, overall, that's a very economical permit, considering what other permits cost throughout the state to use oceanfront or even downtown areas, which are generally a lot more expensive. So overall, in parking, with these adjustments, we project an increase of roughly $600,000, as shown on the table here. And I'll pass it on to Director Wilshire.
Yeah, I won't spend a ton of time on this, but the big takeaway, so this is our list of capital projects for fiscal year '25. Doing capital projects is critical. Obviously, this is us reinvesting in our infrastructure and everything that we have to maintain. The big takeaway is originally when we were at the table a year ago, kind of at our mid-cycle, we weren't sure on our reserves picture. We didn't know where our revenues were going to be. We were still kind of being a little bit cautious. So we had about $1.4 million, so $1.485 million in capital originally planned for '25. After those couple successful years and our reserves being healthy, we really want to kind of catch up on some of that deferred maintenance and capital spending. And so we're adding a little bit more money up to that kind of $2 million range, $2.125 million. That's more in line with what we'd spend historically on capital. It is about 10% of our operating budget. The previous few years, we've kind of trimmed that back to save dollars. And so the thing with maintenance and big projects like this, you can kick the can, but it just gets more expensive and more problematic down the road. So if we have an opportunity, which we do now, and we have some healthy reserves, it's really a good time to kind of catch up on some of those maintenance projects. And so the column on the rightmost column is what we're proposing to get done in our fiscal year '25 with respect to capital projects. Next slide.
Yes, me. Okay, so this is our last slide of the presentation for this section. And so I just wanted to make you aware, and the public that may be watching and present, that last year the city rolled out a new online budget platform called OpenGov, which is available to the public, that provides live detailed information of the city's entire budget, including the waterfronts. OpenGo provides tables, drop-down budget information for anyone interested in seeing this. It gets very specific. It's a lot of information from all city departments. It's a significant tool that shows transparency in our budget process. We received so far very positive feedback from the public that already have gone in here. So with that, I've included a QR code that you can scan with your phones, and it will take you directly to the Waterfront budget. And you'll be able to see our tables, narratives, and the plan for fiscal year '25. And in coming years, you'll see this tool being likely expanded, and it'll be a primary source of reporting to our commissions, to council, as well as the public. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions or take any comments. Thank you.
Commissioner Cohen?
I'm just going to recuse myself. I didn't realize that there's BAP issues on this budget, so I'm going to leave the room at this point.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ford?
Thank you. Maybe I missed it, but could you share why you don't think FEMA will reimburse the storm-related costs?
Yeah, Commissioner Ford, we're still in process with that. We've got dozens of claims citywide and about half a dozen claims with the waterfront, and so we're receiving information back periodically. Some of the larger ones, the rock revetment and dredging within the harbor, so those are kind of the big ticket items, about $1.5 million. FEMA's first indication is that they will not be accepting those claims. There is an appeal process. We'll grind through it and go through it as long as we can. It's a big enough dollar amount that it's worth fighting for. But in all of the meetings that I've been present in, they're indicating that those major ones are not reimbursable. Mainly, in a nutshell, the rock revetment is they essentially are hesitant or don't reimburse permanent structures. And so they'll replace something, they'll rebuild something that was there in the first place. But the idea from their point of view is that because it was a sand barrier and we essentially turned it into a rock barrier, that there may be some concern with getting reimbursed there. But we're still fighting the fight.
Great, thank you. The other question I had is, given the decision this week by the City Council to not accept any parking fee increases downtown, do you anticipate any pushback on this proposal?
Yeah, Commissioner Ford, that's a great question. Yeah, it's the hot topic right now, downtown parking and how to balance their budget. We're in a little bit of a different situation. Parking is kind of it's really two different entities, the parking operation downtown and the waterfront. We're really coastal serving. Parking is one of those huge legs that we rely on for revenue as well to support not only that division, but our entire department. So although we try and stay lockstep with them, the way people use those lots is very different. We do offer the annual parking permit, which has huge subscribership, and so that is really kind of a way for locals and waterfront users to kind of get a discounted rate at the parking. And it's really one of our only tools to generate revenue that we need. So I'm hoping that we can convey that message with council, because we don't have a lot of tools in the tool chest to generate that type of revenue. And I think at the end of the day, those type of lots are used really, really differently. We do have the 90-minute lot that serves business, whereas the downtown lots are kind of purely serving business. So there's that argument of what's the trade-off between bringing people to business and parking for free, or as opposed to parking for long-term, whereas we're more coastal serving, so people are going there as a destination. It's not necessarily a business per se as a destination. So my hope is they see that distinction. I know they did last year. Some of their recommendations, especially around the annual parking permit, was that it is way too cheap. So I think they do view waterfront parking and downtown parking a little bit differently.
I will say, though, as I was applying for the commission and had individual conversations with some of the council members, their one of their major concerns was access to the harbor. So I don't know if we're out of the woods entirely. But thanks.
Vice Chair Stanhope?
Yes, I just have a question just regarding those two big-scale projects, the Marina 2, 3, and 4 redevelopment and the coastal resiliency. I noticed that they're not on the schedule for 2025, but do we have any timeline of when we would kind of start those big ones?
Yeah, Commissioner Stanwick, good question. Those are huge projects, so they take time. On our 25 budget, we've put aside $100,000 to start planning for the Marinas 2, 3, and 4
Okay.
replacement, and so that would be bringing a consultant on, maybe something similar to what the Marina 1 replacement was, maybe utilizing some internal public works engineers, and just kind of get that ball rolling, so we can at least get a conceptual plan, some cost estimates together, so we can start budgeting and eventually determine how much we can fund on our own and how much we would need to borrow against, essentially, get a loan to complete the rest. That's for the Marina 2, 3, 4, so longer time horizon. We're talking kind of five years type thing, but the planning can start now. With respect to sea level rise, coastal resilience, so the city was awarded a $1.5 million grant to look at sea level rise adaptation citywide. So this is looking at the waterfront, the harbor, business district. It's looking at our wastewater treatment plant, drainage, streets, all that stuff. That was recently awarded to Stantec, and so they're going to be working with the city over the coming year to kind of roadmap that for us, develop projects, and give us some guidance on what we can do. The waterfront will be at that table, and will be a big advocate for how that planning looks in the waterfront, as we saw in the last 2 years, from kind of the yacht club to Ledbetter, is a big issue. You know, we need to figure out something in that area to make it more resilient. So I think we'll have to wait about a year or more until Stantec kind of does all of the research and gets this report together, and we'll use that as a map to budget and build projects for future resilience.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yes, my concern is about slip fees. As I recall, I don't know what the trend is over the last 5 years. You may, and if you can share it, that's great. But in my mind's eye, it was like 2 to 3%, then 2 to 3%, then 4%, then 5%, now 10%. So when I look at that, I go, is that really sustainable? That what we're doing is, you know, okay, this year we've got a huge insurance bill, and no one's arguing that you've got to pay that. And so as a consequence, we have to raise fees. Well, you know, my issue is, do you have to always raise, are you going to raise it to 10% and then take it back to 5% next year? Or is this are you looking at this as 10% forever? And so that, if it is, then I take a look at your reserves. And you've got $500,000 in reserves. And you've decided to use some of that to catch up with your backlog in what I don't even call capital projects, I call them maintenance projects. So, I mean, there seems to be, you know, structural issues that you have to deal with, and we can't solve those issues by just raising it another percent, 10%, 15% next year or whatever. We've got to come up with a structural solution to this problem, because there are no real big capital projects here. These things are just maintenance projects that you can't do and didn't have the funds last year to do. So this year you're trying to catch up with some of those maintenance projects, which I certainly agree with. But don't we want to get into a position where we can, you know, have, you know, a regular incremental increase as opposed to a big jump in slip fees, yet still do projects like replacing marinas? And I don't see in this a strategy to do that. It just seems like every year it's a different, you know, you're trying to figure out how we can solve this problem as opposed to sort of a structural solution to this. Because to me, if what you've got here is the $2 million a year is really a critical maintenance program. It's not, to me, it's not a capital budget. There are no real new projects here. I mean, there are a couple of them, the marina software, and, you know, and a metering system, but the big ones, the heavy timber on Stearns, the annual marina projects, you know, commercial area improvements, they're critical maintenance projects, and I'm all for it. But what happens is we're not in a position to fund the big projects like the replacement of those marinas. So are we going to, next year, are we going to start to move into how are we going to solve these structural problems? Or do you have a plan right now that you're going to follow? So.
Yeah, I'd be happy to respond to that. Well, in short, this is budgeting, right? And so the economic climate drives a lot of the inflationary needs for us to raise fees. And so you're right that 10% slip fee increase are very unique. They're unique in timing, not unique in comparison to what our neighbors are doing. We are still historically very, very low with respect to our monthly slip fees. So I tend to disagree that there's a structural issue. We've been working over the last 4 or 5 years to balance our budget, which means balancing our operating budget, including that capital, which is not something that had been done in the past. And we're very close. We're very close to doing that. I think $2 million a year is a reasonable amount to spend in capital. I don't think planning to do those large projects, sometimes borrowing money to do those larger projects is the wisest way to do it, instead of kind of sitting on cash to do that. And so you can balance that as is. As far as a plan goes, there's kind of a two-prong approach. And so instead of looking at the year-over-year increases, we do a good job of surveying all of the marinas around us and looking at their fees. You look at a lot of our neighbors, they had 20, 30% slip fee increases, massive mooring increases. We're trying to be more steady than that, more responsible and calculated. And so I don't think we're that far off. I do disagree that there is a structural issue. You know, we've covered our operating budget and had dollars on hand to do the capital we need, even through the toughest of times. And so we're pretty fiscally sustainable as we are now. It's just there are some headwinds ahead. And so it would be very unwise to not raise fees at this current moment because we need those funds for immediate costs. Where that will lead to, if the economy changes and inflation drops way down and our costs balance out, then we can kind of look at our 6-year cash flow and balance that out based on, we can kind of retweak some numbers. But just knowing that our two big levers are parking and slip fee increases.
Right, and I guess my issue is how much do you have a general estimate of the cost of the marinas, the rebuilds of the replacement of the marinas?
Well, just like going into any project, and so the city right now is budgeting to rebuild the police station. It's a very big project. They bond against it, they borrow against it. Until you get into that process with construction costs, you don't really know. It costs money to put together accurate cost estimates. We haven't done that yet. So we can kind of put our finger up in the air and get an idea. We can base it on what the Marina One replacement was. But until you have a contractor on hand or pay somebody to design it and give you a legitimate cost estimate, those are rough estimates. We kind of have that, and Cesar mentioned that, kind of in the maybe $10+ million range. That's a real estimate.
The $10 million range would take you 5 years.
No, I think we're looking at that a little differently. So we borrowed about $12 to $15 million to do the Marina One replacement. Within our budget, we're servicing debt. We're servicing about $12 million in debt right now, so we pay about $2 million a year. Okay. Those debts are coming true, so we'll have an appetite to take on more debt. It's all kind of timing, so there's multiple loans that are getting paid down, just kind of like a home mortgage. As those get down, we have a little bit more appetite for debt. So I don't think the Marinas 2, 3, and 4 replacement project would be something that there would ever be a scenario where we would pay for that all in cash, nor do I think that would be the wisest way to do it.
Wait, I just would hate to see a big capital project like that. If we need $2 million a year to basically do annual critical maintenance program, you know, the impact that trying to also jam in there $10 million worth of projects would be, you know, I don't know how, it'd almost be impossible. That's my concern.
No, it becomes a debt service payment, not $10 million worth of project.
Glad to hear you say that. So, thank you.
Commissioner Seth Anderson, please.
Thank you. Could you give I hope this is the right spot to dive into this just a little bit off of Commissioner Stanowic's question. What was the big improvements that we got in Marina One, or what would be the changes that we'd be getting in the new marinas?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. So if you go down to Marina 2, 3, and 4, they're wood. They're wood fingers, wood docks, older utility systems. If you go on Marina 1, it's all concrete deck with kind of new internal electric utilities, water utilities. So it would be a system like that. The good thing about the wood marinas is we're really versed on maintaining them. We can rebuild fingers, you can replace wood as it ages, but there's kind of a point when maintenance gets so expensive to a point that you need to replace it. And so it would be a similar system to what Marina 1 is, a concrete deck with internal utilities and just kind of the modern style of a marina dock.
And the utilities themselves, are they more efficient? On Marina 1, are we getting more efficiencies from those, or is it just a more streamlined, easily accessible UCSB port type of upgrade? Obviously, not exactly like that, but
Not efficiency from like an electrical efficiency point of view, but an efficiency from a maintenance point of view. And so, I mean, it's really difficult maintaining electrical conduit in salt water. So we have a lot of outages, our maintenance crews down there all the time repairing dock box outages, shorts, all that sort of stuff. It happens on Marina 1 too, for sure, but kind of more so in Marinas 2, 3, and 4, and that goes for water and all that as well. So we'll have water leaks and that sort of thing. And so when you replace a system, they contain it better, the conduit's better, the junction boxes are better. It's kind of just less maintenance issues, but not more energy efficient.
Mm-hmm. And is there a tiering between the existing marinas that are going to get redone? Is there a bigger benefit or easier? You're going to get more bang for your buck on any one in particular, or are they all even?
Yeah, and so we track our maintenance history on all of the marinas, and so as that kind of those dollars go up and the amount of hours we're spending on different marinas, the real question is the logistics of replacing them all. There's obviously some economies of scale of doing it all at once, but where do you put all those boats? How do you really do that? So there needs to be like a huge amount of logistical Tetris of just moving boats around when you do something like that. And so it would likely be like a phased project where you do one and then slide everyone over and move them back. And so it's that's kind of half the battle, is figuring out where to put everybody.
Were there any lessons learned from one that you would change for the future ones?
I wasn't here when that project happened, so we relied heavily on Public Works, and so they have engineers available and project manager support available. We have a small kind of capital and project management team, but when you step into a bigger project like this, we would love their support again, and definitely rely on project management support from either a contractor or internal city services, just to make sure that somebody's on top of that project for the however many months it would take to complete.
Thank you.
Honorable Commissioner McCray.
Yes, I just want to take this opportunity to thank staff for having gone the extra mile to provide the public the opportunity to see the budget ahead and have a few weeks to digest it before we're here today looking to adopt it and forward a recommendation. You scheduled an additional special Harbor Commission meeting with full Harbor Commission, which I think was a great opportunity for the public to be able to see that. And then today, we don't see a lot of people here. Maybe there's somebody online, but it did provide the public an opportunity to actually review these things and provide meaningful public comment. So thank you very much.
Just to be sure, Angela, there are no hands raised, right?
At this moment, I don't see any hands raised online, and I don't have any speaker slips for people in the room.
Okay. Does someone want to summon Commissioner Cohen back? Unless you have any further comments.
No, I think she wanted to recuse herself from
the vote.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have, do you want to read the item again, please, Angela?
It's item number 4.
We're gonna vote. Sorry, I was just. Thank you, though, Eva. We appreciate that, Eva.
It's item number 4, fiscal year 2025 waterfront budget recommendation excluding slip-related fees. A recommendation that Harbor Commission receive a presentation on the Waterfront Department's proposed fiscal year 2025 budget submittal, excluding discussion on slip-related fees. Discuss and forward recommendation to City Council for approval of the Waterfront Department's proposed fiscal year 2025 budget and incorporation into the city's budget process.
All right, I think I'm ready with a motion. I move that the Harbor Commission forward recommendation to City Council for approval of the Waterfront Budget's proposed fiscal year 2025 budget and incorporation into the city budget process.
Do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Angela?
Commissioner Cohen has recused herself. Commissioner Ford?
Yes.
Commissioner McCray?
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stanwyck?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yeah, I just have a question. Commissioner Cohen was involved with all so many of the meetings and discussions on it, and there's just one item, so that she can't vote on, is that right? That doesn't.
It's really up to her or up to you as a commissioner
it's
to
up to
recuse from yourself, either if it's based on perception or however it is. So, it's really up to her if she wants to recuse herself or not.
Gotcha, okay. Yes, I do vote yes.
And Chair Stedman.
Yes, I do vote yes.
That's unanimous with one abstention. Thank you.
All right. Now we can welcome back.
Actually, I could just say that this next item is a slip hole, or I have a material conflict of interest in this one as well. So I'm going to recuse myself for this discussion. Yeah.
Musical chairs around here.
Yeah.
All right. Can you please?
I have a quick comment.
Yes.
So I'd like to comment that in these things, in these issues where we have multiple things before us simultaneously, I think it's possible for us to vote everything but the one where an individual commissioner has a conflict, and then have that commissioner stand down on just that one item. So if we wanted to use that tool, we could. It was very efficient for you just to simply recuse yourself, but there were other pathways available. Thank you.
What should I have done? I apologize.
I think you did fine.
Oh, okay.
You did
Yeah,
great.
yeah, you did fine.
Happy
No,
to.
I agree, you were there, you were such a part of the discussions.
No,
Felt like
I,
you should be in the room, so maybe next year we can bifurcate that out.
I appreciate that. Yeah, if I had thought about it, I would have mentioned to peel that item out. That was my fault. But I assume everything got, resolved,
went well.
so yeah.
Yeah, going forward, if anybody does have something that they want to recuse, they can let us know in advance, and
Right.
we can separate the items out. It does make it a little easier, but how it went tonight was totally
Okay,
fine.
great.
Yeah, great recommendations. Thanks, Commissioner McCray and everyone. Do you want to read item number 5, please, Angela?
Item number 5, fiscal year 2025 waterfront budget recommendations for slip-related fees. Recommendation that Harbor Commission review proposed fiscal year 2025 slip-related fee changes. Discuss and forward recommendation to City Council for approval as part of the Waterfront Department's proposed fiscal year 2025 budget and incorporation into the city's budget process.
Chair Stedman, Commissioners, members of the public, hello again. Right now, I bring to you a presentation on fee adjustments for slip transfer fees and slip fees. Okay, so we'll dive right in. So in the Marina Management Program, the Waterfront is proposing a 10% increase for slip permits for fiscal year 25. As one of the department's most consistent and impactful revenue sources, these increases require to balance the increasing operational needs of the department. This increase will include recreational fees and commercial fees. but it will not affect liveaboard fees. So basically, slip fees are going up, or proposed going up by 10%, but we're not increasing the liveaboard fee by 10%, like as we did last year. So those who are liveaboards will only be subject to the 10% slip fee increase, just to clarify that section. So the total estimated impact of this fee increase is roughly $250,000 in additional revenue. Also, we're proposing the increase to visiting vessels by 25 cents for vessels under 65 feet and $1 increase for vessels over 65 feet in length. This will bring an additional $130,000 in revenue. And these are the most impactful fees that we have there. You see in this table. So the slip transfer fee will be adjusted based on the policy guidance from the Harbor Commission and staff. In general, the transfer fees on smaller slips will decrease while the transfer fees on larger slips will increase. The net result is aimed to be revenue neutral. So we're not seeing extra revenue, which is as one revenue goes up, the other one goes down, and there's no additional revenue. So with that, shown on this table, we propose a reduction in transfer fees for slip sizes 35 feet or less in length, while increasing fees for slips over 50 feet in length. And this is per foot measure. And commercial fishing slips will remain the same, so they're not being affected. So this table right here better describes the implementation timeline through fiscal year 2029, with fiscal year 25 highlighted in green. So this fee schedule was formulated back in 2019 by the Harbor Commission Slip Subcommittee. And it was a significant process that took a lot of effort from staff and from the commission subcommittee to accomplish. And this gives you an overview of how we're looking into the coming years all the way through fiscal year 2029. One thing we're not including in here is any inflationary fees for this table. That's something that has been discussed in the past, or actually in recent meetings. And that is something that, looking ahead, we can further explore with the direction of the full commission. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions on this topic. Thanks.
Any questions? Commissioner Cohen?
Yeah. So I thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the work that I missed too. I appreciate it. I know I've been a part of this process, and it's been a lot of work for everyone. So it's been really great working with Commissioner Stanwyck and Commissioner Anderson on this as well. I know that before my time, there was quite a bit of work that was done on the slip transfer fee, and this was something that that came up, and I wanted to bring it up where all of the people that have worked on this, Commissioner Nelson, I think Commissioner Stanwyck, I'm not sure who else worked on that particular issue. But what we were struggling with was reducing fees, knowing that with inflation over the last few years, that we're not really capturing that. And inflation has been, in some cases, 18% or more since this was first, well, I guess it was done in 2021 originally and then implemented in 2022. Is that right?
Yes, I think we're on year 3 of implementation. So we kind of discussed it through 2022. I think 2023 was the first change that we made.
Okay. So, and it's how many years is it all together? It's, what, 7 years? Is that right?
7, yes.
Yeah. So that was the one piece of the puzzle that I think maybe got overlooked in the process, was that over the course of 7 years, $200 in and of itself is going to be less. And so when we go down to 100, we're not only, cutting the fee in half, we're really cutting it by much more than half, maybe 70%, as much as that over 7 years. And I don't think that that's the intent. And so the conversation was, do we want to bring this item either back to, I don't know if it was, if that committee is dissolved, or I guess it would be a work group that did this is dissolved. We want to bring that back to them to say, hey, can we relook at this item with reflection on inflation and how that could impact it? Because we do, as a harbor, depend upon the transfer fees, to make our budget. And obviously, it's the only way for us to recapture, what is required of us from the California Lands Commission. Is that right? So that was the question. And I don't know if we would be able to form, I know you love work groups, to look at that issue, or if that's something that the budget committee could look at. We did not want to exclude any commissioners in that conversation. And so, yeah.
Staff's recommend, it could be handled pretty simply, and so it's really just kind of picking an inflationary number. And so a way that we'd probably recommend handling is next year is our 2-year budget cycle, so we could even propose just doing kind of a catch-up and say, hey, across the board, we're going to apply a 10% or a 15% inflationary increase, and then that could be put to the whole Harbor Commission. It could come back and you all could say, no, we think 20 is more appropriate, we think none is more appropriate. Not to take that away, you could do that right now as a commission, but next 2-year budget cycle might be a good time to kind of, for us to kind of get the numbers together, and then we could present you a set of numbers that is 15% increased and a set of numbers that is not, and you could essentially kind of choose it going forward. So we could just make it one kind of cleanup, inflationary cleanup.
I'm fine with that. I just wanted to make sure that we, involve the full commission in that conversation, since I know a lot of people did a lot of work on this particular item.
So 2 notes. One, that subcommittee's been dissolved, and for the second time, you've overlooked my participation on that particular slip transfer subcommittee. I was the chair. So I want that in the public record.
I believe I did mention you, Commissioner Stanwyck. I'm sorry, Commissioner.
I'm Stedman.
Stedman.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Shall we? Read the item, please.
Item number 5, fiscal year 2025 waterfront budget recommendation for slip-related fees. Recommendation that Harbor Commission review proposed fiscal year 2025 slip-related fee changes, discuss and forward recommendation to City Council for approval as part of the Waterfront Department's proposed fiscal year 2025 budget and incorporation into the city's budget process.
Thank you, Angela. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to move the Waterfront Department fee adjustment schedule excluding slip and transfer fees.
I second that motion.
Chair Stedman and Nelson, just to be clear, your motion was to move forward the budget excluding slip and transfer fees. This one, this one is only the slip and transfer fees.
Yep, correct. I just read the top. At the top, it says excluding slip and transfer fees.
Commissioner McCray?
No, not, we're on number
excluding,
5.
Yeah.
It includes the slip transfer fees.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Do you want to restate your motion?
Yeah, I would say, I move that we approve the fiscal year 25 fee adjustments in slip and transfer fees.
Very well. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Ford?
Yes?
Commissioner McCray?
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stanwyck has recused himself. Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Cohen?
Yes.
Chair Stedman?
Yay.
That's unanimous with 1 recusal.
Very well. Can someone fetch, here he comes. Welcome back. Can you please read item number 6?
Item number 6, anchorage and mooring policy discussion. Recommendation that Harbor Commission receive a presentation from staff discussing a proposal to expand the existing mooring program by installing additional mooring locations throughout the summer anchorage area. Advise on whether the waterfront should pursue efforts to expand the existing mooring program.
Good evening, Chair Stedman, Commissioners, and members of the public. My name is Nathan Aldridge. I am the Harbor Operations Manager. And this evening, I am going to be discussing our anchorage and mooring policy and some possible directions we may go. Back in October of 2023, the Harbor Commission received a staff presentation from Public Works Department and the waterfront regarding the seasonal anchorage. The speakers provided details on the city's desalinization plant, raw water intake structures and intake pipe, and the El Estero outfall pipe. Staff from Public Works Resources reported that in 2019, divers working on the offshore structure reported some damage to the intake structures, consistent with an anchor dragging on the lid, catching the cover and causing damage to the fastening system. And then more recently in 2023, similar damage was discovered at the intake structure, which elevated some concerns and a call for some needed protection. In October, it was just prior to my role as Harbor Operations Manager, and what I wanted to do was spend some time sort of summing up the discussion where we had left off, and then submit another proposal for ways that we can possibly move forward to achieve some common goals for the various stakeholders using this space. So the initial proposal that was presented was to amend our municipal code in the section 17.20.260 to eliminate the seasonal anchorage area. And then also to amend section 265 to expand the existing no anchorage area to include the area over all of that infrastructure, which is indicated in this schematic in A, B, C, D, where the seasonal anchorage is, which is currently open from April through October for anchoring. In follow-up questions and discussion, several harbor commissioners expressed hesitance with eliminating mooring altogether in the seasonal anchorage area. And commissioners spoke of the historical usage of the area as a space for vessels to anchor in somewhat calmer waters during these fair weather months. And the commission expressed a desire to look at other options for protecting the infrastructure in the area while seeking to preserve usage of the area in some form. And so, in looking at the staff reports and the minutes, the feedback I found comes down to sort of three priorities. One was to protect critical city infrastructure in the area. Two is continued public access to mooring or anchorage space. And then finally, an effort made to prevent moored or anchoring vessels from going aground. So this is another schematic, a rough out of our current mooring area, which you may have seen before in a previous presentation. We have 46 total sites that are available in our mooring area. I think currently now we have a little over 20 sites currently in use. And these mooring sites are determined by a few things. One is the size of the mooring vessel, the gross tonnage, the scope needed for anchoring, and the importance of maintaining a buffer between each of these sites. Up north of us, Monterey Harbor has a seasonal program that's operated under a permit similar to Santa Barbara with the California Coastal Commission and also the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. And in Monterey, vessels that are up to 45 feet in length and under 10 tons may be placed on a two-point mooring system during the identical seasonal that we have from April 1st to October 31st. And their moorings are rented on a monthly basis, and the charge includes a dinghy space as well. And the permit requires all moorings to be clear from November 1st through March 31st. So similar to our seasonal anchorage closer, mirrors that same sort of winter swell, Pacific Northwest swell season. They also do have an open anchorage but boats cannot be anchored in these waters for more than 30 days in any 6-month period. So a comp for Santa Barbara here is our year anchorage. You can see on the far right of the schematic, where we now allow sort of unlimited anchoring for an unlimited period of time. They do have a restriction for no more than 30 days for a 6-month period in that a similar space. And so to take the conversation a bit further, the view you see up here is a possible seasonal mooring expansion. Working with some similar team members from Public Works, they have drawn up a proposal that would hopefully move toward achieving some of the stakeholder goals that I mentioned. In this schematic, they could possibly add 16 additional mooring sites. And what it would do, it would vary from about 175 foot of swing space up to 300 feet of swing space. Once again, the goals would be to protect critical infrastructure, to continue to provide public access to this area, and then add protective measures to prevent vessels from going aground. And then additionally, vessels on these moorings would be easier to track and oversee from the waterfront perspective. It would allow waterfront to access vessel owner information and require vessels to be inspected before anchoring on these moorings. As a sort of reminder, in our previous discussions on grounded vessels, in January, we had a large vessel full of hazardous material that grounded right on sort of the Mission Creek sensitive wetland area. Yep. This would also protect Mission Creek specifically and ensure the vast majority of all vessels that are anchored off of East Beach would be anchored safely on moorings. So city costs associated with grounded vessels, they range from $3,000 up to $20,000, depending upon the size and material of the vessel and sort of the presence of hazardous materials. And so since the mooring program's inception in 2006, the number of grounded vessels has been reduced significantly in the city of Santa Barbara, from an average of about 10 to 12 vessel groundings per year to currently 2 to 3 groundings per year. Mooring cost to install vary between about $5,000 and $9,000 in our current system to install all mooring and tackle, as well as maintenance and of the permitted mooring on a year basis. And to date, knocking on wood, there have been no vessels from the East Beach mooring field that have been broken free and grounded as a result of a failed mooring or a ground tackle, which is important. So some considerations to think about in this proposal. These moorings could be a mix of an entire season, so from an April 1st to a November 1st or October 31st. It could be on a monthly basis, it could be on a nightly basis, or a combination thereof. I mentioned in the staff report, Catalina does a very, very involved system of moorings. They don't have fixed marinas, but their mooring system is fairly elaborate. Hundreds and hundreds of moorings up and down their areas from Tuna Harbors and Avalon. But if this is a proposal that would be interesting to the commission to pursue further with staff, we could look at having a combination of, a couple moorings for a seasonal perspective, several that would be month to month, and reserve some for overnight moorings as well. So in the interest of public safety, as well as serious environmental concerns associated with potential grounded vessels, the Waterfront supports expanding this mooring program to encourage boaters, from the free anchorage to choose a more secure means of securing their vessel, as opposed to an uninspected or a potentially insufficient anchoring system that currently exists out in the year-round anchorage, which have been known to fail at sort of the worst time. So staff remains willing to work with the commission to come up with some additional solutions to this area that would meet the goals of all of the various stakeholders. But before more work is done, the Waterfront Department is looking for some direction as to whether we should continue with efforts to expand our additional mooring program and examine this seasonal anchorage area. And at this point, I am happy to take on questions from the commission.
Commissioner McCray?
Yes, thank you very much for that presentation. As one who's somewhat experienced with Catalina's mooring system, I like the direction that you're going with this. I like the security, but I think there's a lot to be learned at Catalina, where they've been doing this for decades, maybe even over 100 years. They offer a 2-point mooring system. It's a simple system, and it really allows a lot of vessels to use a very limited amount of space. I think offering moorings like this would actually help move us away from the derelict vessel issue in a big way. And the cost to moor a boat there could be designed such that it recouped the cost of installing the mooring and also providing the service of keeping track of who's in which spot and all those kinds of things that go with it. So my suggestion is to really take a good close look at what goes on at Catalina and what they've come up with as their solution after all those many, many years. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Commissioner McRae. And in full agreement with that, there are areas and organizations that have been doing this for years and years, and I think they've been very effective at addressing some of the issues that you spoke of, particularly with the grounded vessels and what we have. Thank you.
Angela, do we have any hands raised?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commission? Commissioner Stano?
No, I mean, thank you for the presentation. I thought that was really helpful. And yeah, I mean, I think this is a good solution to the public works thing that we had kind of discussed. Also, as Commissioner McCray said, I think it's a good beta test for the problem of the boats that are coming aground during the storms. I think it gives them really a viable option to tie up to a mooring. And just kind of, and thanks for giving those ballpark estimates on the cost, because I think, if we take, hypothetical $5,000 to $9,000, even on the high end, $9,000 to install, and looking at those kind of estimates for the mooring, I mean, you figure, on a low end, like $30 a night. I mean, we could really recoup the entire cost in a year, hypothetically, if they were doing that per night. So I think that might be something to kind of take a look at, that it's probably not going to be a super capital intensive project to even try this. But yeah, I think it's a good idea to at least look into.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair Sandwick. Once again, in agreement with the intention of that, while seeking to preserve the public access and the public nature for a use of that area while preserving that critical city infrastructure as well, too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I agree with you, Vice Chair. Commissioner McCray?
Yeah, I just have a question about the Monterey included dinghy space. So I think the intent was that Monterey not only includes the mooring spot for a fee, but there's a dinghy spot in the harbor for people to take their dinghy from their boat and tie it up while they're ashore. Is that the case?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner McCray. That's my understanding. I was up there several months ago, and similar to our area behind Fish Float where we have skiff row, we provide actually several locations the harbor for skiffs for people who are on moorings, just to get to that exact nature of what you're speaking of too. So that'd be an integral part of the program. For if people do come in and they're transiting mariners coming up or down the coast and wish to come for an overnight, I would venture the vast majority of them do have a skiff or dinghy they're going to want to bring into the harbor, to come to dinner at one of the restaurants or to, for a few days or so. So I think providing a space is going to be really important for that, and we do have that as of now.
Perfect. I was going to ask if we would be able to accommodate that with our current infrastructure in the harbor and space.
Yes, correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Nelson.
I'm just curious now, you mentioned significant environmental damage. I'm assuming that's from the boats, that's not from mooring. It's the impact of boats that break free or wash ashore.
Yeah, Commissioner Nelson, that's my understanding from, prior to my time as well, looking at, the past, 15, 20 years. My understanding is looking at sort of the historical record. In the early 2000s, there were a series of years where upwards of, I think, 15 or 20 vessels had been left submerged in the area, from just east of the wharf all the way down East Beach. And some significant grant money was awarded to try to remove that marine debris. I think it was a big lift, no pun intended, but it took a lot of money and a lot of resources to clean up a lot of that seafloor and that seabed. And as you know, with the sort of the drift and the tides, a lot of that ends up washing up on the beaches, becomes a public health hazard. And so a lot of work was done to get a lot of vessels that had been sunk and not addressed because I think of the intensive capital that would need to do that.
Now, it's good to know. I wasn't aware of the environmental impact associated with that. And then I note that you got to go to the Coastal Commission. Assuming that's a daunting task in and of itself. So would that be something that Public Works takes the lead on?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Nelson. Once again, I've been in discussion with Public Works periodically in the last couple months to sort of make sort of initial presentation, that I gave you this evening, with the intention that our current permit would need to be amended, not necessarily made as a standalone new permit. My understanding is that with a combination of what we have in place right now and some additional site-specific testing in the areas that we currently do for our mooring program right now, both with bacteria and heavy metals and such, that if we had a similar testing program in place, I think the amending of the permit, once again, I'm going to knock on wood, but would not be insurmountable to be able to change the footprint of what we currently do have.
And finally, the straight line that includes the new additional mooring area, is that the Harbor District line?
Yeah, great. Now that you did ask, I have some information here from our municipal code with our Title 17 definition. So the entire the Harbor District is constituted as the entire waterfront of the city, including all navigable waters and all tidelands and submerged lands, whether filled or unfilled, situated below the line of mean high tide, bounded by the limits of the city as now fixed or hereafter may be extended.
Great, thank you.
All the way up to Ledbetter.
Right, no.
Vice Chair?
Oh, yeah, I just have one question. The options to put the mooring field in, is the option to be that entire area either closed or entirely moorings, or is there an option to like partial moorings along those pipes and then the other part to be anchorage? Is there an option to do a combination of anchorage and moorings, or is it strictly just going to be kind of moorings?
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair Stanwyck. I would say all options exist as of now. I think this was the initial sort of stab at the feedback that the waterfront received from that October meeting. I think for all intents and purposes, it does make the most amount of sense if we're moving towards this direction to have that area be strictly moorings. What it does is you can see from this schematic here, it does a good job of protecting both the seawater intake and the wastewater outfall, which extends further. The wastewater outfall line is that darker sort of bluish green line extending down to the bottom of the page, while giving a little bit of space, obviously, for vessels transiting in and out of that area too. But we can play around with sizing. We can play around with amounts. And Public Works was generous enough to help generate this with some of their data, copying and sort of using what we have in our requirements for our current mooring area right now. But we could completely play with that. We could have all 175-foot scope. We could have just one or two large. We can look at that. With Commissioner McCrae, his suggestion of looking at Catalina, the two-point mooring system is by far the most stable and most reliable. But the good news is we don't need to reinvent the wheel for this. And I think using the example of what they've done in our current existing mooring program, which I think past iterations of this commission and also staff at the waterfront spent a lot of good time and research looking into what is most practical and safe for having anchor and road. I think we can come up with a program that I think hopefully satisfies all of these concerns.
Great, thanks.
Are there any other questions from the commission? Yes, Commissioner Seth Anderson.
Thank you. Just echoing everyone's sentiment, yeah, it seems like you guys have headed in the right direction. It seems like a good possible solution. My only question is more just knowledge-based. How close is the mooring boundary to the swimming buoy? What's the buffer between, is there a buffer between that?
So are you, Commissioner Anderson, thank you, or are you referring to the
Like if you're on the beach.
finger
and
buoys, the seasonal finger buoys that get dropped on?
Yeah, I guess if you're on the beach and someone says, let's swim to the buoy.
Yes, thank you.
How close is that to the?
I'm not sure if that sort of overhead picture has those in there. I don't think it does. But as you know, those are seasonal, and they're put out right around this time of year, the middle of May or so. And they do extend in a straight line. If you look from point A to between point F and point K on this map, we have a road map, so to speak, that we use a contractor when we do put those out. There is a little bit of movement every year depending upon how they're arranged, so it's not perfectly in a straight line oftentimes. I think the contractor does their best to do that, and so they do get shifted and pulled. But the map of those moorings and that swing space does incorporate a safe distance of that too. And just as a reminder, as of now, you have vessels that do transit that sort of area in between the mooring space and where the swim buoys are. Knowing everybody is responsible for their wake on a vessel, and the need to operate at either 5 knots or less within 200 feet of a bathing beach or 100 feet of a bather in the Harbors and Navigation Code as well.
Commissioner McCray?
A couple of just fun things. First of all, I guess I'll quit looking for the wrecks that I used to try to fish inside the anchorage now. I can kind of give up on that. And then secondly, just as a point of historical interest, Santa Barbara has a measured mile that's right along that beach. And the idea was you take your small skiff and go as fast as you can and see how much speed you could generate between the markers. But I guess with GPS now, nobody needs to do that. No longer a use that needs to be considered.
All right. Any other questions? Commissioner Ford, do you have a question?
No, I'm ready to make a motion.
Very well, please.
I'd like to propose and make a motion that the waterfront pursue efforts to expand the existing mooring program.
We have a second?
I'll second the motion.
This is a motion by Commissioner Ford, seconded by Commissioner Stanowick to propose that Waterfront pursue efforts to expand the existing mooring program. Commissioner McCray?
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stanowick?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Cohen?
Yes.
Commissioner Ford?
Yes.
Chair Stedman?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
All right, moving on to the department update.
Chair Stedman, Commissioners, and members of the public, once again, Nathan Aldridge, Harbor Operations Manager. And I'd like to present this evening's Harbor Operations Report. And the first item I'd like to bring up for discussion is our Harbor Patrol vessel replacement project for our current Boat 3 is going along very well. Just about a month and a half ago, I was up in Vallejo at Mare Island in the old naval base to look at the Moose Boats dry docks where they are currently hard at work at our new Boat 3. And took a few pictures here. Once again, the boat is going to be a 35-foot catamaran. And it will have 2 remote-controlled fire monitors on the bow and also on the cabin, which will pump over 1,400 gallons per minute. This would be a significant increase in our firefighting capacity from our current vessel we have right now. The vessel will be equipped with FLIR and sonar, and it's going to aid in our rescue missions, and with an expected top speed of over 40 knots on a planing hull, it will enable our officers to arrive on scene quickly, regardless of ocean conditions. The planned delivery and our sea trials is expected for this upcoming fall and winter. And from the right, you have a CAD drawing of what the vessel will look like upon completion. And I want to come back also before I move on to something that Commissioner Ford mentioned again about financial or fiscal planning, and also Mr. Barrios. Prior to my time and continuous to being here, prudent annual financial contributions toward our waterfront department's vessel replacement fund over years and years has enabled us to really build a vessel that will hopefully provide decades of superior service to the entire waterfront community and the boating community here in Southern California. The department continues to contribute to our vessel replacement funds to ensure timely replacement of additional harbor patrol vessels when needed. And speaking of someone who has connections up and down the coast, we are, I would say, very unique in that the prioritization of monies and allocations to have a vessel like this in a department like we have, it's incredible to have the support that we have internally here too, and I'm very, very thankful, that I think some sound financial planning will enable us to continue to stay ahead of the curve and provide excellent life-saving and rescue and fire suppression for our communities. But we're very lucky, I think, to be getting a boat of this caliber. And so I just want to express, publicly gratitude for the commission support and also our internal waterfront support for our continued harbor patrol projects. So moving on to a recap of Operation Clean Sweep, our annual seafloor cleanup event, which happened on May 4th. We had over 30 volunteers, including divers this year, moved over 1,300 pounds of debris from the seafloor. We focused over in Marina 1, Marinas G through J, and we made such quick work, we decided to tack on K-finger as well in the cleanup section, which is super. So some items that were pulled up, we had crab receivers, some hoop nets, we had a bicycle, some carpet, skateboard, and then our own resident vessel technician, Mark Stouter, there pulling up an entire sunken skiff. So as always, it was a great turnout for our volunteers from Channel Keeper. We had NOAA, Power Squadron, Salty Dog, city staff, and of course, Commissioner Stedman, Chair Stedman. So special thanks to all who helped to come out to make our Clean Marine event a huge success once again. And just for some stats for all of you stat geeks, it's the 16th annual event that we've had. And this event has removed over 24 tons of marine debris from our harbor during that time, which is incredible. Marburg has a roll-off that's weighed after each time, and we do keep a running log of that. And all of this are items that would continue to deteriorate, but we do a really, really great job of keeping our clean marina something we're very proud of. Moving along to our next fun event, coming up on this Saturday, Nautical Swap Meet. And we'll have, I think as of now I checked, we have now in the mid-30s, over 30 sellers from up and down the coast will be coming to the event. All of our treasure hunters will be assembling on our main harbor parking lot from the wee hours of the morning after about 6 o'clock onward. The event begins 8 o'clock, will run till noon. Admission is free. We'll have dozens of vendors who will be displaying and selling marine or nautical items. So come on out and spend the morning looking for some new gear, enjoying some complimentary coffee provided by harbor merchants. Vendor signups are only $25 and can be found either on the department's website or you can walk in person at our waterfront office as well. And then last but not least, we haven't had some sort of harbor patrol blotter as of late. And so I brought up two sort of notable calls we've had in the last month or so. One was a cruise ship emergency. So on October 22nd, we had received a distress call from one of their inbound cruise ships coming relayed from the Coast Guard that they had an onboard medical emergency, that they were going to need to come in and weigh anchor earlier than their 7 a.m. arrival. And so after receiving that emergency late call, officers Hubbard, Martinez, and Nicodemus, along with medics from AMR, responded on Boat 2 to this inbound ship for a patient in a medically induced coma. Officers safely transferred the patient, the ship's nurse, and the patient's wife onto the boat, and while they're en route back to the harbor, assisted with ventilating the patient on board the boat. Officers then safely transported the patient and all personnel back to our dock, where the ambulance transported the patient to Cottage Hospital for further evaluation. And notably, this was one of 3 medical emergencies that day that officers responded to from that cruise ship. And last but not least, 2 days after that, a timely topic, we had a report of a vessel dragging off of East Beach. And officers Martinez and Nicodemus responded to a sailboat drifting dangerously close to running aground in only 7 feet of water. And luckily, they were able to use the grapnel and were able to save the boat, safely bring it under tow, and brought it back into the harbor, preventing another grounded vessel, where then they made attempts to track down that vessel owner. So despite the reports that we do have, when vessels do go aground, I can assure you that many, many, many more boats are saved by officers who are out on regular patrols and quickly responding to reports of vessels adrift. So another good save from the Harbor Patrol. And that is it from the Harbor Operations Report. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, I have a comment. Great looking boat you got being built, super. I know that there are now modern engine control systems that use dual engines, and you can just joggle over the thing straight sideways, keep the boat oriented the same way. And I'm wondering if you've taken advantage of those opportunities.
Thank you, Commissioner McRae. And once again, with the generous allocation for funding, I was able to dream big in the design of this vessel, and it will be equipped with an Optimus joystick system. So not to knock any of our excellent boat operators who are very competent, it will enable us to have a whole new world of control of that boat. If they're needing to remain on station, fighting a fire, stay on scene or dewatering a vessel, as you well know, being able to keep both of the throttles in neutral and have the ability to either walk the boat in a 90-degree way, to spin it on its axis, to be able to bump it up at an angle. It'll be able to provide a whole new sort of world of control for the officers. Yeah. So we are planning on incorporating that in the boat. Thank you.
That's absolutely super, especially when you consider some giant fire pump jetting water at 1,000,000 miles an hour towards some fire that needs a little water on it. Phenomenal. Thank you.
Commissioner Seth Anderson. Yeah, it's not showing up. Sorry.
That was a nice presentation. Thank you, Nathan. One question. When the cruise ship recognized they had a passenger that was in induced coma, did they pump up the speed? Do they get to go faster and break the 10 knot, 12 knot rule? Yes, that's like captain decides what he. Makes sense, just curious.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Anderson. And in addition to that, they are also able to make an unplanned stop or a stop ahead of schedule, which is what they did. In my experience as an officer, this happened occasionally. It's not all the time, but it does happen, where they will sort of look at the route they're intending to go and sort of triage where, the best, either whether it's a tier 1 trauma center to go to or where, the best, or closest port. And they identified that, based on their trajectory, that would have been where our current anchor point is too. And I think they arrived on anchor a little before midnight or about midnight of that night too. And so, yeah, we were able to provide the access to have, medics right on board really quickly to provide advanced life support, and then get them into a cottage hospital within probably a matter of, 20 to 30 minutes after they weighed anchor.
Nice. Thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you very much, Nathan. We'll move on to commission and staff communications. Commissioner Nelson.
Yes, I think you all received a PDF with what looked like a scrapbook without any narrative attached to it. I'd hope to do a slideshow for you, but that requires the permission of the city council and the mayor to be able to do that. So the PDF is what you got. But I had a really great visit to Pillar Point Marine Harbor in San Mateo County. And my wife thought it was a good idea for me to get out of the Airbnb that we were staying in for the week. So I reached out to the San Mateo Harbor District and said, is there any way I could stop by in the next 3 days and just see your facilities and how you operate? And once again, I learned that, it's great when you find a place where people have a shared objective and common problems, because when you have those two things, an exchange of information is very helpful and enlightening. And even though the Pillar Point Marina is only like 380 slips, it has all the stuff that we're dealing with. They have, one of the slides was a big blue building, tall building. Well, that's their ice house, and right below it is their fuel dock. And it's operated by the same operator. They have their big kayak area. They only have one kayak company that does it down there. They only have a handful of leases, but they have the same lease management strategy issues that we are talking about and will talk about. Interestingly, one of the things that they have is when a tenant decides to sell the lease or to move on, to be able to do just like a transfer tax on a slip, they pay a transfer tax of $10,000 to transfer their lease agreement for a restaurant or other facility. Interestingly, there was a little teeny buggy in there that they took me around with. I was with a harbor patrol officer named Kerry Smith, who knows a handful of harbor patrol guys from our harbor. He's a training officer. He was talking famously about a lot of folks that were there. And he drove me around to what they call Surfers Point. And at Surfers Point, they're building this big outdoor showers. And if you looked at my slides, you will see that they're having brand new outdoor showers for patrons and surfers. And it's exposed to the world. So they too are dealing with the same sort of thing. But I made a picture of the sign. I don't know how much money it was, but what they obviously did was reach out, approach the Coastal Commission, and approach the Coastal Conservancy to help them fund that restroom. So in terms of our capital budget, there could be an opportunity sometimes when money is short to apply to the Coastal Conservancy for funding like that. But the showstopper was when I basically started talking about how they do maintenance dredging. And they exist inside a national marine sanctuary. So when I used the word, what do you do with dredge spoil, it was as if I had engaged in blasphemy. You don't use the word dredge spoil around there. It's all beach replenishment, it's all restoration, because they have a fit getting and keeping the permits to be able to do maintenance dredging. And they don't have a a federal fund source. They don't have the Corps of Engineers and a Coast Guard station to make sure there's funding there. So they have to generate the revenues to do it. So it was a fascinating trip. And not only when I called to see if there was somebody I could meet with, when I got there, the elected chair of the Harbor District was there. His name is Tom Matush, and he's very active with the Potomac Marine Fisheries Council. And when I told him that Merritt McRae was also on our board, he says, that's the guy that's trying to take our Bob Dooley off the commission. I said, I think he has the support, Mr. Dooley, on the commission. So it was a really good exchange. I really enjoyed it, and I would encourage anybody else who's on a vacation in a port city or a harbor city to drop by and see how they do it. So, thanks.
I have a quick question for you, Commissioner Nelson. Not to give the impression that San Mateo County only has jurisdiction over Half Moon Bay to the northeast. On the other side of the peninsula, they have all that harbor district along the...
Yeah, they have it's called like Oyster Harbor.
That's correct.
It's closer. They have two facilities.
Right.
They also have right off the harbor, they have what's known as Mavericks, which is this mountain, this geological mountain that creates waves that are huge, 20 and 30 on average. So they're outfitted right there at the harbor. That's where they take off from. The other thing, I said, what's the biggest unforeseen enforcement issue you have to deal with? And it is kayak fishing. Apparently, there are scuds of people that go out and kayak fish, and they're spending all this money on this, and they are always getting in trouble. They're always getting in the tides, so it becomes a continuing problem for the harbor patrol. So, and finally, and I know it's getting late, we were talking about mooring areas. So lo and behold, a 100-foot tugboat, World War II era tugboat, pulls in and immediately becomes a problem. They now have insurance. So the tugboat anchors off, and then the owners disappear, and then the Coast Guard looks into it, and they think it's leaking. So they suddenly basically, get a hold of the owners, and the owners suddenly come into the port to get all the hazardous waste and all the stuff off the boat. In the process, they damage the work pier, and then they just absconded. They just left. So the harbor was left with the bill of getting it away from the pier. So they had damage to the pier they had to pay for, which was like $25,000, and then to move it into a mooring area was another $25,000, only for it to sink. And it's there to this day, and they are estimating that it's going to take, $100,000 or more to get rid of it. So mooring areas without licensed, without insured vessels out there can be a problem. Anyway, so I invited them to come down to see us.
To see
Because they were
Director
so
Wiltshire.
accommodating to me, and I copied Director Wiltshire on my thank you to them, and it was a good time.
Thank you. Are there any other commission communications or staff communications?
Just to quote Chris Voss, come on down Saturday and have a look at some heavy, shiny, valuable things.
Very well.
I said one thing.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to make an announcement. Dark Coffee has been open now for about a month. It's a pretty cool spot, good coffee, mixture of locals and tourists. They redid the whole inside, and yeah, it looks great. So if you haven't checked it out, definitely come stop by. It's pretty cool.
And just one final
Just
check for...
quick,
Yes,
just
go
a
ahead.
quick addition to that. They've done more revenue in the short time that they've been open than we did in an entire year
Wow,
in
I
that
believe it, yeah.
retail store at the museum. So it's going to be great.
Awesome.
Excellent. Final check for public speakers?
There are no speakers at this time.
Very well. Do we have a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Adjourned.